Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere dark, literally. You're barefoot, your hands are tied behind your back with rough rope, and you're stumbling down a narrow passage carved into cold stone. The air smells of mildew and wet ash. The torchlight ahead flickers, but all you can really see is the back of the guard leading you, his boots crunching over something you're trying not to identify. You've just been sentenced. Maybe for theft. Maybe because someone powerful didn't like your face. It honestly doesn't matter. You've arrived at your destination, the dungeon. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing who's drifting off around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The door shuts behind you with a shudder, and instantly the torchlight is gone. There's no dramatic slam, just a grim finality. You don't even hear a lock. It's worse than that. It means no one's worried about you getting out. You're alone now, and the dark is complete. Not poetic, moody darkness. Not, it's kinda dim in here dark. We're talking the kind of pitch black that makes you blink to check if your eyes are still open. You shuffle forward, arms still bound, and immediately your foot sinks ankle deep into something damp. It's straw, or was, a century ago. Now it's a fermented mulch of rat droppings, spilled soup, and the kinds of fluids that only come out of people when they've completely given up on dignity. Welcome to your new carpet. The stench hits harder than you expected. You try to breathe through your mouth, but even that tastes wrong. Ammonia, rot, mold, and something disturbingly sweet. It's all baked into the stone. See, medieval dungeons weren't designed for airflow. They were meant to trap not just people, but every smell, scream, and disease that came with them. And here's the kicker. This isn't even the worst part yet. Behind you, something skitters. It might be a rat. It might be 5. You freeze, but then, light pressure on your foot. You kick, hard, and hear something squeak and splash away into the shadows. Sorry, your roommates don't believe in personal space. You grope along the stone wall until you find a rough protrusion, a rock, maybe, and sink down against it. The chill seeps in instantly, and the dampness clings. There's no fire, of course. No blanket. Just the wet embrace of medieval architecture. People often think of dungeons as grand, echoing chambers, lined with iron bars and flaming torches like in movies. In reality, most were underground basements, dug below castles or city walls, and often no more than 5 feet high. You can't stand up in here. Maybe that's intentional. You're easier to break when you're always bent. Oh, and remember that thing about rats? Yeah, they're the least of your problems. There are fleas too, lice, and a gentle hum in your ears that might be flies, or something worse. You try to orient yourself, but your sense of time's already fading. Outside, the world might be bright with sun or deep into night, but inside here it's all one endless moment. Historians still argue whether prisoners in medieval dungeons were kept in complete darkness as a method of torture, or simply because candles were expensive. Either way, the effect is the same. Your thoughts begin to slide. You think about the accusations against you. Maybe you did it. Maybe not. But does it really matter? You're here now, and your jailer doesn't care. He has the keys, the food, the torchlight. You have your thoughts, and soon, even those might betray you. At some point, the door creaks open again. It's almost a relief. At least it breaks the silence. A figure looms in the entryway, holding a torch that dazzles your vision. You squint against it, blinking rapidly, and that's when you get your first proper look at your new home. It's worse than you imagined. The walls are green with algae, slimy with condensation. Rusted hooks hang from the ceiling. There are what look like scratch marks along the far wall, but maybe that's just the stone. Maybe. The man with the torch is your jailer. He doesn't speak, just throws something at you. A crust of bread, barely edible. It lands in the straw, instantly picking up layers of things you don't want to identify. But you're hungry. Already. This is the part they don't tell you in books. How quickly your body begins to betray you. The cold hurts, but the hunger stings worse. Your teeth ache. Your stomach clenches. You would eat anything. And you probably will. You crawl to the bread and take a bite. It's hard enough to chip a tooth. But it's food. Kind of. The torchlight fades again as the man steps out, leaving you alone once more. You curl up, trying to keep warm, but every time you close your eyes, a new sensation wakes you. Something crawling. A drip from the ceiling onto your neck. A distant sound, metal? A groan? You're not sure. And sleep? Forget about it. There's no soft mattress, no pillow, no guarantee you'll wake up with the same number of limbs you went to bed with. Now, a quick aside, because let's be honest, we need a breather. Did you know some medieval dungeons were flooded on purpose? Yup. They'd pipe in river water just high enough to keep you standing, sometimes for days. It was called the standing cell. The goal was simple: break your spirit without ever touching you. No fire, no whip, just cold water and endless hours of shivering until your mind begged to confess something. Anything. Back to your own cell. You're not in water yet, but your bones feel soggy. You try to shift position, only to realize your hands are starting to swell from the rope. The skin beneath is raw. Infection? Already creeping in. Some prisoners in medieval records were found with their fingers rotted to the bone after just a few days in chains. One even had maggots in his open wrist wounds, which oddly may have kept him alive by eating the dead flesh. Medieval medicine, a true win some, lose some scenario. And let's not forget the sounds. They say silence is peaceful, but this silence is haunted. Your ears invent noises. Whispers. Footsteps. Breathing. You think someone's in the cell with you. Then you're sure they're not. Then the cycle repeats. Your heart pounds so hard, it's its own drumbeat. And still, time refuses to pass. There's no window. No way to track hours. Your body's internal clock begins to fail. Is it the same day? Has it been 2? More? Historians still argue whether prisoners developed a sort of dungeon madness from isolation, or if the damp alone was enough to fracture the brain. You're not sure, but you know this. Something inside you feels cracked. Eventually, the door creaks again. Your pulse races. Another scrap of food? A summons? You wait, but no one enters. The door just closes again. Was it ever opened? You don't sleep that night, or what might have been night. Instead, you curl tighter, try not to cry. Because here's another reality check. No one's coming for you. Not your family, not your friends, and certainly not some daring rescue party. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a dungeon, and you're not the main character. You're just one of hundreds who came here to vanish. You're not sure how long you've been in here, but something's changing. It's not the air, still stale, still soaked with centuries of suffering, but something deeper. A feeling that something is about to happen. And then you hear them. Footsteps. Not the heavy drag of the guards. These are quicker, more deliberate. Someone with keys, maybe, or someone with power. The footsteps stop just outside your door. A pause. Then, metal scrapes against metal. A lock turns, and in walks a man you'll come to know very well. He's your jailer. You think you know what a jailer looks like. Big, scarred, wearing a ring of keys and yelling silence, like in movies. Nope. This one is lean, not particularly tall, and oddly calm. His tunic is stained, the kind of brown you get when every color has been washed out by blood, grease, and time. And his smile? Well, it's not friendly. Let's talk about him, shall we? This man doesn't think of himself as cruel. He's not a torturer, though, spoiler, he absolutely dabbles. No, he thinks he's doing his job. You broke the law. You deserve to be here. And now, it's his job to keep you secure. He carries a stick, which he taps against the wall as he walks. It's not for support. It's for rhythm, control, power. In this world, the jailer is king, and you are most definitely not a noble guest. Some were worse than others. In some dungeons, You could pay for better treatment if your family had money. A softer corner, an extra blanket, even food with actual flavor. But you? Let's assume you're broke. Because that's more fun. In that case, you're just meat. Meat with lungs. And your jailer? He decides when you breathe easier and when you don't breathe at all. Still alive? He asks, but he's not really asking. It's just something to say before he kicks your ribs. Not hard, but enough to remind you that your body isn't yours anymore. He looks around, inspecting the cell like a landlord checking for damage. He steps closer and tilts your chin up with the stick. His eyes flick to the corners of your mouth, your nose. He's checking for signs of plague. Not because he cares if you die, but because plague spreads and dead men don't pay bribes. See, that's your jailer's real job, extortion. The dungeon might be run by a castle or a city guard, but the cell block? That's his personal fiefdom. Want water? That'll cost you. Want a dry rag to wrap your infected ankle? That'll cost more. Want to send a letter? Hope you remembered to hide a coin somewhere unmentionable. Some jailers even kept little notebooks, names of prisoners, crimes, family reputations. A primitive yelp, but for pain. You try to speak, just to say, please. It comes out as a dry rasp. Your throat is raw. There's been no water since you arrived. He chuckles, then spits on the floor and rubs it into the dirt with his boot. That's your answer. There's a moment, just a flicker, where you wonder if you could attack him. Get the keys. Get out. But you don't move. Because chained to the wall, half-starved, half-blind, and barely clothed, you'd stand less of a chance than a snowball in a blacksmith's apron. And besides, what if you failed? The consequences, let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's a whole future section. Still, something inside you itches. Humiliation mixed with fear. A powerless kind of rage that settles low in your gut like a swallowed stone. Now let's talk about his power. See, your jailer isn't a bureaucrat. He's not checking your prison term or reading your case file. In most medieval prisons, there was no term. People were often held for years without trial, or they were held while awaiting confession, which just meant until they broke. And your jailer? He decides when to tighten the screws. Literally and figuratively. Historians still argue whether medieval jailers had strict codes of conduct or if everything devolved into personal vendettas and payoffs. Reality likely sits somewhere in the middle, structured cruelty flavored with improvisational sadism. Your jailer now does something strange. He pulls a small object from his pocket, a piece of dried fruit. He bites into it slowly, chews, looks at you, then drops the pit at your feet and walks out. He leaves the door open. It's not a kindness. It's a trick, and you know it. You stare at that door. Light from the corridor floods the cell, pale and golden, as if the sun exists out there. Your body surges forward a few inches before your mind catches up. It's bait. There could be a guard around the corner with a club, waiting to make an example of you. Or a trap that slams shut the moment you move. Or maybe they just want to see if you'll try, so they can punish you harder later. You stay, not because you're smart, but because you're afraid. And that fear, that's his job too. Quick side note for your imagination. Some jailers charged fees for everything. There are recorded cases of prisoners being asked to pay for their own shackles. Their own shackles. And when they couldn't, they got extra weight, worse chains, tighter cuffs. Also fun. Some dungeons had strong boxes, cells made entirely of iron bars in the center of a stone room. No walls, no privacy, just cold iron in every direction. Designed for humiliation. Your jailer would sometimes toss you in there just to break the monotony. Back in your cell, the door finally swings shut. Not a bang, just the soft scrape of finality. You hadn't moved, but now you're not sure if that earned you respect or just confirmed you're broken. Either way, you're alone again. Your thoughts return to the jailer. You begin to realize something unsettling. You want him to come back. Not because you like him, not because he's kind, but because the silence, the stillness, the rotting wet straw, it's all worse. Even a kick to the ribs is something. something to mark the passage of time, something to say, you're still alive. And now you start to understand why some prisoners grew loyal to their jailers. Stockholm Syndrome before Stockholm existed. In a world stripped of choices, the man with the keys becomes God. Even when he's cruel, even when he laughs, even when he forgets your name. You try to remember your own. You can't. And that's the moment you realize just how far you've fallen. Time slips. It doesn't tick here. It drips, like the water sliding down the mossy walls. You start measuring it by the patterns of mold, the change in the scent of the air, or whether the straw has grown a new kind of fuzz overnight. There's no sunbeam to chase across the floor, no chime of bells to tell you when it's morning mass. Just the gnawing sense that today is exactly the same as yesterday, and tomorrow will hurt just as much. And now, you have to face a new reality. You need to rest. Your body begs for it. But there's no place to lie flat that won't leave your spine shaped like a question mark. Every surface is damp or jagged, and the ground has turned to a slow simmering stew of rot. You hesitate to lower your weight onto it, but exhaustion wins. It always does. You settle in. The straw beneath you squelches. It's not straw, really, more a soggy mesh of mold and memories. You try to ignore the sharp bite of something under your hip. Bone. Wood. You don't want to know. Every inhale tastes like fungus. Not a poetic forest floor mushroom smell. This is the sticky, nose-coating kind. The air is so thick you could chew it. And it's warm, like someone else's breath is always hanging on your lips. This is the floor. And yes, you're going to be spending a lot of time with it. Quick fun fact. Many medieval dungeons weren't floors and walls in the way we think of them. They were pits, natural caves, or repurposed wells. Builders didn't lay out clean stone squares. They found the wettest, darkest, least hospitable part of the castle and called it done. The worse it was, the better. And even when dungeons had actual floors, they weren't swept. Ever. That muck you're lying in, it's not new. Generations of prisoners have melted into this mulch, some literally. Bodies were often left to decompose in place, buried only by time and the waste of those who came after. You roll to your side to escape the pressure on your ribs, still sore from yesterday's not-quite kick. And that's when you meet your cellmate. Not a person, a rat, a big one. You lock eyes for a heartbeat. It blinks slowly, almost politely. Then it walks across your ankle like you're just another warm stone in its kingdom. You don't scream. Not anymore. Rats are your neighbors now, and they're doing better than you are. Healthier, more energetic, better fed. You wonder if someone sneaks in food for them, or if they just help themselves to anything. Did you know that in some medieval prisons, rats were considered part of the punishment? Chronicles described them chewing through clothing and flesh if you stayed still too long. And since chains often kept people from swatting them away, prisoners had to choose exhaustion or being gnawed alive. You pick exhaustion. At some point, maybe a few hours later, maybe days, you begin hallucinating. Just a little. You see a light where there's none. A voice says your name, and for a moment, you believe it. Then it vanishes. You stare at the wall for so long you start to see images in the grime. Faces, shapes, sometimes whole scenes, like paintings you're not sure you remember. This is dungeon fever. A real phenomenon, by the way. Modern psychologists link it to sensory deprivation, malnutrition, and stress. The mind, starved of input, starts generating its own noise. In the Middle Ages, of course, they didn't call it that. They just called you broken. And the people in charge? They preferred you that way. The filth around you begins to shift, maybe from movement, maybe just your mind playing tricks. You think you see fingers in the straw, a knuckle, then a whole hand. It's old, long dead, but it's there. You recoil, but not far. You can't go far. And besides, you've seen worse now. Once, you would have gagged. Now, you just feel cold. You try to rest again, curling into yourself, keeping your limbs close. The chain on your ankle clinks with each tiny movement, its metal already eating into your skin. The cuffs are rusted shut, crusted with layers of what used to be blood. You dream of vinegar just to clean them, not to drink. Not yet. Let's pivot for a second. Want to hear something truly stomach-turning? In the Tower of London, one particularly infamous cell was known as the Little Ease. It was so small you couldn't stand, sit, or lie down properly. It was designed to keep your body in constant tension. You couldn't find peace, not even a bad version of it. And people were left in there for days, sometimes longer, just stewing in their own twisted shape until pain and madness braided together. Back to your own prison now. You don't have a Little Ease, but your space isn't much bigger. And unlike that famous tower, no one will remember your name. There are no records here, just walls and wet straw. And speaking of wet, a sudden splash startles you. Water drips from a crack in the ceiling above. Not a leak. Those you could learn to tolerate. This is worse. It's targeted, rhythmic, and you realize something. The dripping is centered exactly on where you tried to sleep. Coincidence? Maybe, but you move anyway. It doesn't help. The new corner is colder. You lie there, shaking. You think about home. You think about food. Not just a meal, anything. A crust, a seed. Even the memory of salt would make you weep. You think about light, and what it felt like to stretch in the sun. You remember conversations, laughter, and you try to recreate the sound in your head, but it's fuzzy, like someone's muffled a radio underwater. One historian described dungeon life as a slow burial. Not dramatic, not violent, just a steady descent into nothing, while the world forgets you ever stood tall. You close your eyes again, and that's when the rats return. More of them this time. You feel one tugging at your tunic. Another skitters across your shoulder. You don't move. You can't. Somewhere deep in your chest, a voice whispers, "This is normal now." You've accepted the floor. You've made peace with the filth. And whether you realize it or not, the dungeon has started to reshape you. You're awake. Or maybe you never slept. It's impossible to tell anymore. Your muscles feel brittle, like sticks soaked in vinegar. You try to stretch, and the motion sends a dull, spreading ache through your shoulders. Your ankle throbs where the iron cuff bites into raw flesh. And your stomach? It's past empty. It's silent. The kind of quiet that means your body has stopped expecting food and started feeding on itself. That's when you hear the footsteps again. Not the jailer this time. Slower. Heavier. The door creaks open just enough to let a long, crooked shadow fall across the straw. And then, without a word, something lumpy lands near your feet with a soft thud. A bowl. Or at least, something that once resembled one. Clay. Cracked. Leaking slightly. Inside, gruel. If you can call it that. It's gray. It sloshes like slime. Smells like wet ash and oats. There are flecks of something green on the surface. Not herbs, but probably mold. You poke at it. It jiggles. Then you eat it. Not because you want to, but because your body demands it. The moment the first spoonless mouthful slides down your throat, your stomach contracts so violently you nearly throw it up. But you don't. You force it down. Every drop. You even lick the rim. Because there's no promise it'll come again tomorrow. In medieval dungeons, meals were generous, if you're into sarcasm. The daily ration varied from a chunk of stale black bread and water to thin gruel like what you're choking down now. Sometimes, if you were lucky or someone outside paid your jailer, you might get boiled beans. But mostly, just this slop, barely enough to keep you alive, and tasteless enough that you start dreaming of dirt. You might be wondering, why not starve yourself? Make a statement? Go full martyr? Funny thing, people tried. But the body has its own cruel agenda. You don't get to choose noble suffering in a dungeon. Hunger eats your morality long before it eats your body. Eventually, everyone eats the slop. Now, about utensils. You don't get any. No spoon. No napkin. No concept of hygiene. You use your fingers, even though your fingernails are caked with grime. You try to be careful, but the liquid runs down your wrists anyway. Into your sleeves. Onto your legs. It soaks into the straw, inviting flies. You try to set the bowl aside, but you flinch. because for a second, it looked like something moved inside it. A little tail. Maybe you imagined it. Maybe you didn't. And water? You'd kill for water. There's none in sight. You remember the damp moss on the walls and the slow drip near your old sleeping corner. You crawl to it, press your cracked lips to the stone, and try to drink. It takes forever. The water comes drop by drop, as if it pities you. It tastes like iron, like cold, like the wall itself. And it's glorious. Did you know some dungeons piped water through gutters from castle moats? That's right. Your refreshment was basically glorified ditch water, thick with mud, fish guts, and whatever floated in from the rest of the town. Dysentery? That was dessert. But you drink it anyway. Because thirst doesn't care about bacteria. Not when your tongue feels like wool and your thoughts blur from dehydration. It's why some prisoners in later centuries actually licked each other's sweat. No judgment, it's survival. Back in your cell, you collapse again. And then, noise. Someone in the next room is coughing. Violently. The kind of dry, barking sound that cuts through stone. It echoes. You count the seconds between each fit until it fades, then flares again. You'll get to know this sound well. Dungeon walls are thick, but sound travels in strange ways underground. You can hear people sobbing through layers of stone, screaming, singing sometimes. One prisoner recites prayers backwards, over and over. Another hums the same 3 notes for hours, maybe days. It's maddening and comforting. It means someone else is alive. Barely. Your ears become your eyes now. You start identifying your neighbors by sound. To your left, the mumbler, always whispering to himself, sometimes laughing. To your right, the quiet one. No sounds, ever. Which is somehow worse. Down the hall, the screamer. You hear him now. A cry tears through the silence. Not sudden, not sharp. A long, grinding wail, like something being pulled from the depths of a man's soul. It rises, collapses, rises again. And you don't flinch. Not anymore. Because this has become your bedtime chorus. The dungeon doesn't do silence. It hums. It breathes. It sings in moans and weeping, and sometimes the rhythmic clatter of iron on stone. Like now. Footsteps. Fast ones. A door slams. Then voices. Sharp. Brutal. You can't make out the words, but the tone is unmistakable. Urgency. Cruel glee. You crawl closer to the bars, pressing your cheek to the cold iron. You can't see anything, but you listen. Deep, wet thuds echo down the corridor. Metal against flesh. Maybe leather. Someone begs. Then gurgles. The screamer has taken center stage again. Let's pause. In medieval prisons, beatings weren't just punishments. They were routine. Corrections, reminders, stress relief for bored guards. Sometimes they were ordered by a magistrate. More often, they were improvised. Done with rods, clubs, even fists. And if the prisoner died? Well, accidents happen. Sometimes, the food cart came before the beatings. That way, you'd be strong enough to endure it. Other times, they beat you because you finished your food too fast. Or because someone else didn't. Or because the jailer was drunk. Back to you. The screaming stops. Abruptly. You don't know what that means. You don't want to. But something shifts inside you. A new thought creeps in. Quiet at first. Then louder. This isn't temporary. You're not waiting for trial. You're not just passing through. You live here now. This is your routine. The gruel. The rats. The endless groaning. The coughs. The scrape of metal. The sobbing you think might be yours. You're part of the ecosystem now. A bug in the belly of the beast. And the worst part? You're adapting. You're eating things you wouldn't have touched a week ago. You're sleeping in filth. You've stopped recoiling at the rats. You no longer cry at night. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because your tears have dried up. You don't think about escape. You don't even think about justice. You think about food, warmth, water, and what the jailer will do tomorrow. You've stopped counting the days. Not because you lost track, but because numbers don't mean anything here. Time is now a feeling. You feel the passage of it in your ribs poking through your skin, in your hair growing thick with grease, in the way your mind doesn't protest when another rat runs across your leg. And it's during one of these timeless moments that you hear it. A shriek. Not pain this time. Not terror. Something worse. It's laughter. High-pitched. Reedy. The kind of cackle that twists your stomach because there's no joy in it. Only madness. You strain your ears. It's coming from the cell across the corridor. Someone's broken. Fully. You don't know who. But you know why. Because you're halfway there too. And you haven't even been tortured yet. You're about to learn what that sounds like. It begins with dragging. Chains on stone. Then groaning hinges. Then begging. Not poetic pleading. Not, please, have mercy, like in the stories. This is raw, throat-torn desperation. A scream that says, I will give you anything. I will betray my family. I will confess to sins I haven't invented yet. Just don't take me in there. But they do. Because that's what the chamber is for. You don't see the room. It's somewhere nearby, maybe around a bend, maybe behind a false wall. But you hear it. Every single detail. A splash. Water. A rattle of iron. A creaking wheel. Then the screaming starts. You sit frozen, back to the damp wall, hands over your ears. But it doesn't help. The cries climb right through you. The walls don't insulate. They echo. And it goes on. 5 minutes. 10. Half an hour. You can't tell. You only know that the screams change, from loud to breathless, to gurgled, to sobbing. Then silence. You whisper to yourself. Anything. Words you used to say before bed. Names. Verses. Childhood songs. But the sound of your own voice seems wrong here. Too soft. Too human. You stop. So what's going on in that chamber? Historically speaking, torture was more organized than you'd think, especially in the high and late Middle Ages. It was often an official procedure, a legal part of getting a confession. And because people back then were very into documenting things, we know a lot about the tools. Let's start with strappado. Your arms are tied behind your back. Then you're hoisted up by a rope attached to your wrists. Then dropped, just enough to dislocate your shoulders. Then again, and again, sometimes with weights tied to your ankles. It leaves no blood, but it ruins you. Another favorite? The rack. You've heard of it. Stretching the body slowly, pulley by pulley. It wasn't about immediate agony. It was about fear, anticipation. Your joints pop, muscles tear, vertebrae separate. It's excruciating, but slow, controlled. And then there's the pear, a metal device inserted into the mouth or elsewhere, then expanded. We'll leave that one there. Historians still argue whether medieval torture was more symbolic than effective. Some say victims would confess just seeing the tools, without being touched. Others argue that pain was the point, information optional. Either way, back in your cell, you now understand the true currency of the dungeon. Fear. The jailer doesn't need to beat you today. He just needs to open the door. Let you hear what's happening down the hall. That's enough. That changes people. You start thinking, what would I confess to? Did I steal? Maybe. Did I plot against someone? Sure. Did I dance with demons? Absolutely. You rehearse these in your head, just in case they ask. And that thought terrifies you, because it means they've already won. You try to sleep, but tonight, sleep won't come. Instead, you dream with your eyes open. You see the chamber, even though you never have. In your mind it's circular, lit by a single flame. Walls lined with tools, tongs, screws, iron boots, pliers. There's a drain in the floor, a stool for the jailer to sit and sip something warm while he waits for you to change your mind. You try to shake the image, but it won't leave. And then you realize, the screaming has stopped. Completely. Not even the whispers. The dungeon has fallen into an unnatural quiet. Like the whole place is holding its breath. You edge toward the bars. Peer through. And there he is. They've dragged the screamer back. He's a shape now. Not a man. Covered in bruises, his arms twisted at odd angles, face swollen. One eye open, one eye not. They toss him into the cell across from yours like a bag of flour. No ceremony. No sympathy. The door slams. And that's it. No medical care. No bandages. No food. He's supposed to either recover or die. Both are acceptable outcomes. You shrink back into your straw. There's a knot in your throat that won't go down. You feel a slow, creeping panic. Not sharp, suffocating. Like you've been buried in warm mud. Because here's the secret. You're next. Not because of what you did. Not because they need something from you. But because they're bored. Because it's your turn. Because the dungeon has a schedule and you're on it. You start preparing mentally. You think, maybe if I don't scream, they'll stop. They won't. Maybe I can bite my tongue and bleed out before they begin. Sorry, the body is tougher than that. Maybe they'll forget I'm here. That actually happens. But not yet. For now, you're just waiting. But not resting. The worst part? You get a little used to it. You learn to lie still for hours. To breathe shallowly. To listen for key rattles like a mouse listening for the hawk. Your world shrinks. It used to be towns, fields, people. Now it's just four walls, one bowl, and whatever pain is echoing through the stones. You dream of light and wake up in pitch black. You dream of silence and wake up to screaming. You dream of sleep and wake up unsure if you ever did. And you wonder, not for the first time, how long it takes before you start to scream too. The chains clink again, a cold reminder of your reality. At first, it was just discomfort, then pain. Now, the metal bites so deeply into your wrists and ankles that every tiny movement sends jolts of agony up your arms and legs. You stare at the iron cuffs, rusted but merciless, as if they have a hunger of their own. Iron was the preferred metal for shackles in medieval dungeons. It was strong, cheap, and cruelly effective. Prisoners often had to endure being chained for days or weeks at a time, unable to stretch or shift. Over time, circulation slowed, skin broke down, and flesh rotted beneath the bindings. And that was just the start. You try to move your fingers, but they twitch with numbness. Your ankle feels like it's on fire and ice simultaneously. You wonder how much longer your limbs will last. You recall reading that in some cases, prisoners' hands and feet would become so damaged from prolonged chaining that doctors later had to amputate. Sometimes, just to stop gangrene from spreading. It's hard to believe you'll make it that far. Your body is starting to fail you, and no one cares. The worst part? You begin to lose track of the boundaries between pain and numbness. Your nerves misfire, sending phantom itches and burning sensations. A strange tingling takes hold, as if tiny insects crawl just beneath your skin. You try to scratch, but your hands won't obey. You feel trapped not just by the iron, but inside your own flesh. Here's a grim historical tidbit. Some prisoners would chew on their own flesh to stave off madness caused by the chains. It was an act of desperation. Others tried to tie makeshift splints or padding around their wrists, often with scraps of cloth so filthy they only made infections worse. You consider both options. Neither sounds appealing. The chains aren't just physical, they shape your entire existence now. You notice that even your breathing is different, shallower, more cautious. You're afraid to cough or sneeze because every jolt hurts like a fresh blow. Historians still argue whether prolonged chaining was deliberately designed to break prisoners' spirits, or if it was simply a convenient method of restraint in crowded, understaffed prisons. The answer is probably both. As the hours crawl by, your muscles begin to waste away. You remember when you could stretch fully, run, or even just shift positions without screaming. Those days are gone. Your cellmate, if you can call him that, is a dark shape curled up in the corner. You can barely make out his breathing over the creaks and drips in the dungeon. Sometimes you wonder if he's alive or just a shadow. You try to talk to him, but words catch in your throat. You realize you've forgotten your own name. Not in a dramatic, existential way, just simply lost the memory. It's like your identity is being squeezed out by the chains. You're not a person anymore. You're a prisoner, chains and all. The dungeon has begun to rewrite you. And now a little light relief. Did you know that some jailers had the gall to charge prisoners for the shackles themselves? Yes, you read that right. If you couldn't pay, they'd tighten them, add extra iron, or replace them with heavier chains. The financial incentives were sickening but effective. The worse your condition, the more likely you were to cough up bribes, assuming you had someone to send them. The door clanks open briefly. The jailer peeks in, eyes gleaming with that petty tyrant's grin. He drops a bucket of murky water just out of reach and slams the door shut again. You lie back, the chains cold against your skin. You wonder, will your limbs last another day? Another hour? Another minute? The answer feels as heavy as the iron itself. The silence in the dungeon is a predator. It waits. It stretches. It consumes what little hope you had left. Days, maybe weeks, blur together into a never-ending night. The air thickens with rot and despair. You're convinced the stone walls themselves are closing in. Your breath fogs the cold, damp air in front of you like a ghost. You haven't felt sunlight for so long that the memory seems almost fictional, a trick your brain plays on you in the dark. You reach out in your mind, tracing the warmth of the sun on your skin, the breeze on your face. It's gone, stolen by the dungeon. You're trapped in a capsule of misery, and the only company you have are rats and shadows. The rats have become bolder, no longer just your distant neighbors. They now crawl over you, biting through the frayed fabric of your tunic, nibbling on whatever bits of skin they can find. You try to shoo them away, but your strength is gone. The best you can do is lie still and endure. Rats in medieval prisons were infamous for spreading disease, but also for psychological torture. Some prisoners believed the rodents were sent by devils to claim their souls. Others thought they were messengers from the outside world, living proof that life went on beyond the dungeon's black heart. You started naming them. There's one with a scar on its ear you call Old Red. Another with a twitchy nose is Whiskers. It's a small act of rebellion, a way to assert some control over your crumbling world. In the corner, a faint glow begins to form. Not light, but flame. A candle burning low. Someone has been here. Someone who cares enough, or hates enough, to come near your cell. You press your face against the bars, trying to see past the shadows. The jailer? A visitor? A fellow prisoner? No, a woman. She slips a small bundle through the bars and whispers your name. You recognize the voice. It's faint, tired, but kind. Inside the bundle is a piece of bread, crusty and old, but real. You stare at it like it's a miracle. The woman speaks again. Keep it safe. Then she disappears. You clutch the bread as if it's the last thing keeping you tethered to the world. You nibble slowly, savoring every crumb. It's the first taste of hope you've had since your capture. This act of mercy, tiny and fragile, reawakens something inside you. The will to survive, to fight. Let's pause for some context. Prisoner aid in medieval times was rare, but not unheard of. Families, friends, or religious orders sometimes smuggled food, money, or messages into dungeons. Secret alliances formed in shadowed corners of castles, where compassion briefly pierced the cruelty. But such kindness came with risk. If caught, the visitor faced imprisonment, torture, or death. So every crumb smuggled was a small act of rebellion against the system. Historians still debate how widespread this was. Some argue it was limited to the elite. Others suggest even common prisoners received occasional aid, though sporadic and unreliable. Regardless, for you, it's a lifeline. The bread fuels a spark of energy. You press your face to the stone wall and imagine the outside world again. The sun, the market stalls, the scent of fresh herbs. You remember laughter, not the eerie laughter from down the hall, but real, warm laughter. You recall soft touches and the sound of rain on rooftops. It's painful, beautiful, unbearable, but you hold on, because the dungeon doesn't just want your body, it wants your soul, and you're not ready to give it away. You spend the next hours staring at the flickering candlelight. It casts long shadows on the wall, turning the cracks into dark rivers. You see faces in the patterns, familiar faces, maybe ghosts. maybe memories. You start talking to them, telling stories you once heard as a child, tales of knights and dragons, of distant lands and brave deeds. Your voice is cracked and hoarse, but it's yours. This ritual keeps the darkness at bay. But survival here is a chess game. Every act of defiance, every whispered word, every stolen crumb carries risk. The jailer returns. His eyes glitter with suspicion. He snatches the candle from your cell and crushes it under his boot. The small light dies with a hiss. You sit in blackness once more. He spits on the floor and says, "You're lucky to be alive." It's not a kindness. It's a threat. You realize the dungeon's true power lies not in chains or cells, but in fear. The fear that every moment could be your last. That mercy is a lie. That hope is a weapon used against you. And when you reach for it, they'll crush your fingers. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. You remember that bread. You remember the whisper. You remember the candle. They are signs that even in the darkest places, light can flicker. And as long as light exists, so does hope. And as long as hope exists, you might just last another day. The dungeon's breath is heavy today, thick with humidity, dampness, and a faint smell of something rotten, like a dead fish trapped beneath the stones. Your skin is clammy, slick with sweat despite the chill. The air seems to hang motionless, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. You lift your head slightly, listening. The faint drip of water, the distant shuffle of footsteps, the occasional scurrying of rats. You realize something unsettling. The dungeon has a rhythm, a pulse, the ebb and flow of life and death playing out in slow, relentless beats. You wonder what day it is, if there even is a day anymore. You try to move, but your body protests fiercely. Muscles scream as if you've been frozen in place for years. You stretch a stiff arm, careful to avoid aggravating the raw skin around your shackles. The chains dig deeper, biting into your flesh like cruel little vipers. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a puddle of murky water. Your face is a mask of grime and hollow eyes. You barely recognize the person staring back. Your hair hangs in greasy tangles. Your lips are cracked and pale. You look older, decades older, yet you know it's only been weeks, maybe days. You sigh, swallowing down the rising nausea. You remember the bread, the whisper, the candle, a flicker of warmth in a sea of darkness. But then a new sensation creeps in. Hunger, not the gnawing emptiness of before. This is different, sharper, more desperate. Your stomach twists violently, sending spasms of pain through your ribs. You try to ignore it. You can't. Food has become a fixation, an obsession. You dream of meals that once seemed ordinary, a steaming bowl of stew, fresh baked bread, juicy fruits. Your mind replays flavors, textures, colors you barely recall. The dungeon starves you not just to break your body, but to erode your very identity. Hunger becomes a weapon, stripping away your humanity one bite at a time. You reach for the clay bowl nearby, the residue of last night's gruel dried to a crust. You lick it clean, tasting the bitter remnants of ash and mold. It's disgusting, but it's all you have. The desperation grows. Your body sends signals you barely understand anymore. Twitches, cramps, shakes. Sometimes you pass out for moments, only to be jolted awake by the cold or the sound of a rat. And then, a strange thing happens. You begin to hallucinate, not the gentle visions of light or ghostly faces. This is different. Harsh, sharp, jagged fragments of memories collide with present fears. You see faces, not friendly ones. Grim, twisted masks staring down at you from the shadows. You hear voices whispering, not comforting prayers, but cruel taunts. The sound of chains rattling, not from your own bindings, but from those you can't see. Your heart pounds as if trying to escape your chest. This is the dungeon's dark gift, madness. It's no surprise that medieval chroniclers often described prisoners as possessed or cursed. The isolation, the hunger, the cold. They frayed minds until reason snapped. And that's when the dungeon starts to feel alive. The walls seem to pulse. The rat's eyes gleam like tiny, malevolent stars. You swear the stones breathe, exhaling stale air heavy with despair. You remember something from a dusty old chronicle, a fringe theory about dungeon acoustics. Some scholars suggest that the design of certain medieval prisons amplified sounds to torment prisoners psychologically, turning whispers and footsteps into roaring specters. Others argue this was unintentional, simply a byproduct of thick stone walls and narrow corridors. Either way, it's working. You press your hands against your ears, trying to block out the eerie chorus. But the voices seep in anyway, weaving into your dreams and waking moments. Your grasp on reality weakens. You clutch at any fragment of hope you can find. The bread, the candle, the whisper. You repeat them like a prayer. You're not sure how much longer you can hold on. But something deep inside refuses to break. A tiny ember of resistance flickers. You grit your teeth, and you decide you will survive, because the dungeon may hold your body, but it will never claim your soul. Quick historical aside, prisoners who lost their minds were sometimes locked in fool's cells, tiny, dark holes designed to isolate and contain madness. These cells had no windows, no light, and sometimes no soundproofing, leaving prisoners to spiral deeper into delirium. Some were forgotten there for years. Historians still argue whether this was deliberate cruelty or a practical way to prevent chaos in the prison system. But the effect was undeniable. Many prisoners emerged broken beyond recognition. You, however, are still holding on. The door creaks open again. Light spills into your cell, harsh and sudden. A figure steps inside, not the jailer. Someone else. A cleric. A man in simple robes, carrying a small book and a lantern. His face is tired but kind. He kneels beside you, murmuring a prayer. He offers a cup of water. Not much, but enough. You drink gratefully, feeling the cool liquid soothe your cracked throat. He speaks softly. You're not forgotten. The words echo in your mind. For a moment, you almost believe them. You wake with a start, your body stiff and aching in that familiar, unyielding cell. The damp chill has seeped deep into your bones, wrapping you in a cold embrace that no amount of shifting can shake. You try to breathe deeply, but the tightness in your chest reminds you. Your lungs are heavy with more than just stale air. This isn't a place for healing. It's a crucible. Your thoughts drift, slow and fragmented, tangled like the strands of your matted hair. You wonder how long you've been here. Days, weeks. Time is a cruel trickster in these walls, an unmeasurable blur that strips away the markers that once tethered you to your past life. And yet, despite the pain and the endless darkness, you cling fiercely to the faint memories of who you once were. You try to stand, but the chains mock your effort, anchoring you in place. The cuffs cut into your wrists and ankles with sharp, relentless bites. Each movement draws a fresh sting. It's as if your own body is conspiring against you, reminding you of your helplessness. Despite the torment, you recall a fact that momentarily distracts you. Medieval dungeons often had hygiene holes, narrow slits or small pits in the floors or walls intended for waste disposal. These were neither pleasant nor sanitary. In fact, they were often sources of noxious smells and breeding grounds for disease. But they were, at least, a grim acknowledgement of the human need to relieve oneself. You reflect on the indignity of such necessity under the watchful eyes of guards. Even the most private bodily functions became public in the dungeon, further eroding your sense of dignity and privacy. Your stomach growls hollowly. Hunger gnaws deep, an unrelenting beast. You've learned to ignore it, to push it aside as a background noise of your existence. But tonight, it screams loud and demanding. Your mind drifts back to that precious crumb of bread, the whispered promise of hope. You want to believe it means something, a lifeline to sanity and survival. But the dungeon reminds you why hope is dangerous. A sudden noise breaks the silence, a heavy thud echoed by distant footsteps. The jailer's arrival. You brace yourself. The sound of the key turning in the lock sets your heart hammering. The door opens with a scraping groan. A bucket is thrown into the cell. Thud. The foul stench of stale water and rotting food fills your nostrils. It's your meager ration for the day. You stare at it, wondering if you have the strength to eat. You force yourself to scoop up the soupy gruel, the spoonless feeding ritual you've come to dread. Each bite is bitter, gritty, and barely sustains you. In your delirium, you think about the folklore surrounding dungeons, the whispered stories of prisoners who, driven mad, would resort to biting off their own fingers or worse, just to distract themselves from the unending hunger and pain. Some of these tales are exaggerated, but many hold terrifying kernels of truth. You shudder and try not to imagine what that desperation feels like. Then you hear it, the unmistakable clatter of chains from the corridor outside your cell. A new prisoner. Someone else has joined the condemned. You strain your ears, catching muffled cries, whispered pleas, and the occasional sharp command. You recognize fear in that voice, raw, unfiltered, and all too familiar. You recall that some medieval dungeons served as holding places for those awaiting trial, but many prisoners were kept indefinitely, forgotten by the justice system, their fates sealed by neglect and cruelty. Historians still argue whether indefinite imprisonment was a deliberate tactic to break dissent or simply the result of administrative chaos. Either way, it's clear that the dungeon was as much a tool of psychological torment as physical punishment. The newcomer's sobs echo through the corridor. You realize with a sinking heart that this is your future mirrored in a stranger's despair. The jailer's footsteps fade, leaving a thick silence. You pull your knees close, wrapping your arms around yourself for warmth and comfort. You think about escape. Not a physical escape, that's impossible, but an escape in your mind. A place where the darkness can't reach. You begin to hum a tune you vaguely remember from your childhood, a lullaby perhaps, or a song from a market square. The melody is faint, but it steadies your shaking heart. You repeat the tune over and over, weaving it into your fading memories. Because in the end, sometimes the only freedom left is the freedom of your mind. You try to join their ranks, to find peace amidst chaos. And as the night deepens, you close your eyes, letting the melody carry you away from the damp, the chains, and the ever-present darkness. The days merge and melt into a monotonous eternity, marked only by the dim flickers of light from the corridor and the ever-present drip of water somewhere deep in the walls. Your body feels like a fragile shell, barely containing the ragged spirit within. You're no longer sure if your hands belong to you or to the cold iron cuffs they are shackled in. Your wrists and ankles throb with a constant ache, a dull roar beneath the surface of your consciousness that never quite fades. You watch as your skin slowly takes on a mottled hue, gray and sickly, a canvas marked by bruises, cuts, and the slow creeping shadows of infection. You're no stranger to pain now, but it has transformed. It's a background noise, like the hum of flies buzzing lazily in the corners. A distant sound breaks your reverie, the creak of a heavy door and the clank of chains against stone. You lift your head, your neck stiff and sore. The jailer approaches, his heavy boots echoing off the walls. He pauses before your cell, then produces a thin rod, its tip sharpened and glinting wickedly in the dim light. Your stomach twists in anticipation. This is not the friendly visit of a mercy giver, or even the grim routine of a meager meal. This is something else, something worse. The jailer slides the rod between the bars and pokes at your shackles, testing their strength. His eyes glint with a cruel amusement as he tightens the bindings one notch tighter. The iron bites deeper into your skin, drawing fresh blood. You grit your teeth, biting back a cry. You've learned that even the smallest adjustments can make an unbearable difference. The medieval jailer's cruel ingenuity is not limited to beatings or torture chambers. Sometimes, the slow, deliberate tightening of chains is punishment enough. It's a constant reminder that you're at their mercy. You try to pull your arms free, but the chains hold fast. A searing pain shoots through your shoulders and down your arms. Your hands tremble, fingers curling involuntarily. Pathetic, the jailer sneers before stomping away. You sink back onto the hard stone floor, swallowing a mix of pain and frustration. You feel the sting of tears welling, but you blink them away. Tears here are a luxury, a sign of weakness to be punished. Your mind drifts to an obscure medieval practice you read about, the use of shame collars. These iron collars were used to immobilize prisoners' heads, forcing them to remain upright and visible, subjected to public humiliation. While you don't have such a device, the tightening chains feel like a metaphorical collar, constricting not just your body, but your very identity. Historians still argue about the prevalence and purpose of these devices, whether they were primarily for punishment or deterrence. What's clear is that humiliation and psychological torment were key tools in medieval imprisonment. Your thoughts swirl, mixing history and personal misery until the line between them blurs. You're no longer sure if your suffering is unique or just one thread in a vast tapestry of cruelty. Your fingers twitch, seeking some motion, some feeling. You try to flex your wrists, but the pain is overwhelming. Still, you persist. You need to know if you still control your body. The dungeon is determined to prove otherwise. A sudden sound cuts through the silence. A rat scrabbling near the corner. It startles you, and you flinch instinctively, sending a fresh wave of pain through your limbs. The rat pauses, its tiny nose twitching as it studies you. It scurries away into the darkness. You envy its freedom. You remember reading that rats were not only scavengers, but sometimes companion animals in medieval prisons, providing warmth, sometimes even a twisted form of social interaction. Of course, they also spread plague and gnaw on wounds, but they were life in the void. You envy their simplicity. Your thoughts wander to your cellmate, the quiet one. You haven't heard a sound from him in days. You wonder if he's alive, if his mind has fled the prison as yours tries to do. Sometimes, in the darkest hours, you whisper to him. Small words, fragments of stories, or simple greetings. No response. You wonder if he remembers you. You wonder if you remember him. You wonder if any of this matters. But the chains keep you grounded. The dungeon keeps you captive. And still, you breathe. And still, you fight. Because in the end, survival is the smallest act of rebellion. Your eyes blink open, adjusting slowly to the dimness of the cell. The thick, suffocating darkness clings to every corner, swallowing your vision whole. Your body feels as if it's been reduced to a bundle of aches and spasms. The chains still hold you fast, cold iron biting deep into flesh that has long since become numb and raw. A sharp ache pulses through your head, a souvenir from days without proper rest or nourishment. You try to lift your arm, but the pain forces it down again. Your thoughts are sluggish, crawling through molasses as if your brain itself were shackled. The walls seem to press in closer, the damp smell growing stronger, mixed with something fouler, sweat, rot, and despair. You try to remember the last time you smelled fresh air or felt sunlight on your face. The memory fades like a distant dream, unreachable and cruel. Your stomach growls. Hunger has become a steady companion, a gnawing beast that can never be truly sated. You think of food not as nourishment, but as a fading concept, a faint glimmer of a life lost. You reach out, feeling the rough stone beneath your fingertips, tracing the faint cracks and pockmarks that map the cell's worn surface. The stone is cold and unyielding, a physical reminder that your world is small and merciless. Suddenly, you hear the faintest sound of footsteps approaching. The shuffle is slow but deliberate. Your heart picks up pace, a thudding in your chest louder than any clatter. The door creaks open, casting a narrow beam of light into your cell. The jailer steps in, his face grim and unchanging. In his hands, he carries a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He drops it near your feet with a grunt. You crawl toward it, the movement sending sharp jolts through your battered body. You unwrap the bundle slowly. Inside, you find a small loaf of bread, crusty, dry, but real. You press it to your lips, tears blurring your vision. The taste is bitter but sweet in a way you can't explain. For a moment, you are transported beyond the stone walls, beyond the chains, beyond the endless darkness. You clutch the bread to your chest, a fragile talisman against despair. Then the jailer turns and leaves without a word. You are left alone with your thoughts. You begin to think about your past, about the life you lived before this prison swallowed you whole. Memories come in flashes, laughter around a fire, the scent of fresh herbs, the warmth of a loved one's touch. These memories are bittersweet, both comforting and cruel. They remind you that you were once free, human, alive. You vow not to lose that spark, no matter how faint it flickers. As night falls, the dungeon's shadows grow deeper. You hear distant screams, muffled sobs, the clinking of chains. You wonder how many souls have passed through this darkness before you. You feel a profound loneliness, yet also a strange connection to the countless others who have suffered here. You whisper a silent prayer, a plea for strength to endure. And in that prayer, you find a thread of hope. The dungeon walls seem to close in tighter today, their cold, damp surfaces pressing against your skin even through your clothes. Your breath is shallow, misting in the frigid air that smells of mold and despair. You lie still on the hard, uneven floor, the rough stones biting into your aching back and limbs. Your wrists and ankles are sore and raw from the relentless iron cuffs, their weight and sharp edges a constant reminder of your captivity. You try to focus on something beyond the pain, a fragment of a memory, a thought, a dream, but your mind is foggy, worn down by hunger and exhaustion. You recall the bread given to you days ago. It was stale and hard, but it sparked a small flame of hope within you, a reminder that some kindness still existed, however rare or fleeting. Yet, that hope feels distant now, buried beneath layers of fear and uncertainty. You're acutely aware of the silence surrounding you, broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing through the dungeon's corridors. The silence weighs heavily, amplifying every small noise, the scrape of a rat's claws, the distant clank of chains, the faint shuffle of footsteps. The rats have become brazen, crawling across your body and nibbling on whatever scraps they can find. You've come to accept their presence as part of your daily existence, even naming a few as if they were companions. Old Red, with his scarred ear and whiskers, twitching his nose inquisitively, provide a strange sense of connection amid isolation. As the hours drag on, you feel a creeping madness settling in. Your mind plays tricks. Shadows on the wall take shapes. Whispers fill the silence, and the stones seem to breathe. You find yourself talking aloud to the shadows, spinning stories and memories to stave off the encroaching despair. In moments of clarity, you think about the torture chambers and the screams echoing down the hallways, remembering the terrifying sounds that once pierced the night. You realize that fear is the dungeon's greatest weapon, more so than the iron and stone. A sudden noise startles you, the sound of heavy boots approaching. The jailer arrives, dragging a new prisoner along the corridor. You listen to the fresh terror in their voice, a mirror of your own. The jailer throws the newcomer into the adjacent cell, slamming the door shut. You press your back against the wall, feeling the weight of shared suffering in the dungeon's dark embrace. You cling to the last vestiges of hope, the whispered promises of the candle's flicker, the stolen bread, the memories of warmth and light. Because as long as you hold on to these, you might just survive another day. The dungeon breathes with a heavy, unyielding presence that presses upon you like the cold stones surrounding your cell. You've long lost track of days and nights. replaced now by a relentless sequence of pain, fear, and small moments of numbness. Your body has become an instrument of suffering, each ache a note in a symphony of despair composed by the dungeon's merciless design. Your wrists and ankles throb under the iron cuffs, the raw skin beneath them a painful reminder of how long you've been shackled. The chain's weight and unyielding grip make every movement a gamble between relief and agony. You try to shift, but the slightest motion sends jagged waves of pain radiating through your limbs. Your muscles have weakened, bones ached, and your skin is marked by bruises and cuts from scraping the cold walls and floor. You wonder how much longer your body can endure before it gives in completely. Hunger gnaws relentlessly at your stomach. It's a hunger beyond mere appetite, a visceral craving that consumes your thoughts, saps your strength, and haunts your dreams. You recall the small piece of bread slipped through the bars weeks ago, a miracle in this abyss, and the faint warmth it sparked inside you. Yet now, hunger feels like a constant shadow, a beast stalking your mind. The dungeon's silence amplifies your isolation. The faint drip of water echoes through the corridors like a metronome marking time you no longer understand. Rats skitter in the darkness, their tiny eyes gleaming as they explore your cell, their presence both a comfort and a curse. You've named a few, Old Red and Whiskers, their company a fragile tether to the outside world, even as they nibble on the sores your chains have caused. Your mind begins to unravel in the quiet. Shadows on the walls morph into shapes, faces of lost loved ones, distorted and twisted by your weary imagination. Whispers echo in your ears, sometimes comforting, sometimes cruel. You talk to the shadows, weaving tales and memories into stories that help keep the madness at bay. You remember the screams that once shattered the silence of the dungeon. Not just the victim's pain, but the echoing laughter of the torturers. The jailer's cruel enjoyment in breaking spirits. The endless parade of agony that has passed through these walls. Fear is the dungeon's most effective weapon. It wraps around your mind, squeezing tighter than any iron shackle. The door suddenly clanks open, jolting you from your thoughts. The jailer appears, dragging a new prisoner along the corridor. Their terrified voice is a mirror of your own fear. The jailer shoves them into the adjacent cell and slams the door shut with a bang that reverberates through your chest. You press yourself against the cold wall, feeling the weight of shared suffering around you. The dungeon is a crucible of souls, each one forged by pain and isolation. In the deepest parts of your mind, you cling to hope, the flicker of candlelight, the whisper of a kind voice, the taste of stolen bread. These fragile sparks keep the darkness at bay, because as long as there is hope, even the darkest dungeon cannot consume you completely. Historical note: medieval prisons were designed less for punishment through incarceration and more for containment and psychological torment. The lack of sanitation, overcrowding, and scarcity of food created deadly conditions. Some prisoners died not from formal execution, but from neglect and disease. Prisoners were often forgotten by the legal system, left to rot indefinitely. Historians still argue about whether this neglect was deliberate cruelty or administrative failure. You wonder about your fate, about the life you left behind, about what waits beyond these walls. For now, all you have is this moment, this breath, this tiny spark of survival. And so you hold on. Your breath comes shallow and uneven as you lie on the cold, damp floor of your cell. The iron shackles bite mercilessly into your wrists and ankles, raw and swollen from constant pressure. Your skin, once supple and warm, has grown mottled and pale, stretched tight over aching bones. The ache in your limbs is relentless, an ever-present reminder that your body is no longer your own. It belongs to the dungeon now. You try to sit up, but your muscles rebel, spasming painfully with the smallest effort. The chains rattle sharply, a harsh metallic sound that seems to echo through the oppressive silence. You lower yourself back down, defeated but not broken. Time is meaningless here. Days bleed into nights, marked only by the faint light filtering through the bars at irregular intervals. The dungeon is a world apart, a place where hope is a flicker, easily snuffed out by despair. You remember the first time you tasted fresh air, stolen in a rare moment outside your cell. It was a brief encounter, but the memory sustains you. The scent of pine, the feel of sunlight on your skin, the sound of birdsong. These small joys feel like treasures now. But the dungeon pulls you back. The damp chill seeps into your bones. The rats scurry past, their tiny eyes gleaming in the shadows. You name them still. Old Red, Whiskers, and a newcomer with a ragged tail. They are your only company, your unlikely friends in this place of torment. Your mind drifts to the stories you've heard. Tales of prisoners driven mad by isolation, some losing years or even decades of their lives behind these walls. Others met their end quietly, victims of neglect or disease. The dungeon is as much a graveyard as a prison. Yet, amidst the darkness, you find small acts of rebellion, the whispered prayers you mutter beneath your breath, the stories you tell to the shadows, the memories you cling to fiercely. These are your armor, your defiance. One day, the door creaks open. A figure steps inside, a fellow prisoner, gaunt and hollow-eyed. He nods to you silently, a gesture of shared suffering and solidarity. In this hellish place, even a nod is a lifeline. You reach out, clasping his hand. For a moment, you are not alone. This brief connection rekindles a fragile hope. You realize that even in the darkest places, human connection endures. It is the light that the dungeon cannot extinguish. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth of that shared humanity. You hold on to it as tightly as you hold on to life itself. Because in the end, it's not just the chains that imprison you, it's the loss of connection. And as long as you remember how to reach out, you are free. Your body is a map of pain, each muscle, each joint marked by the relentless torment of your captivity. The iron cuffs that once merely bit into your wrists and ankles have now worn grooves into your skin, leaving behind scars that tell the story of endless suffering. Your hands tremble uncontrollably, the result of nerve damage from prolonged restraint. Every breath you take is shallow and labored, the cold dampness of the dungeon seeping deep into your lungs. But despite the overwhelming physical agony, your mind refuses to yield. You cling desperately to the threads of memory, your childhood, the laughter of friends, the warmth of sunlight on your face. These memories, though distant and dimming, are the last sanctuary your soul can find. The dungeon's silence is pierced by the distant echoes of footsteps, both a comfort and a terror. You do not know if they bring salvation or further cruelty. You recall the whispered promises of kindness, the candle's flicker, the crumb of bread, the rare acts of mercy that gave you strength. And then, the inevitable, the chains tighten once more. The jailer's cruel amusement is evident as he adjusts the shackles, making sure you feel the weight of your imprisonment. Pain blossoms anew, sharp and unyielding. You close your eyes and retreat inward, seeking solace in your own mind. You hum the lullaby you learned as a child, a melody that has become your shield against despair. It is a small rebellion, a refusal to surrender your humanity. You think about the countless souls who have endured this same fate, the forgotten, the condemned, the lost. The dungeon is a place of endings, but also a crucible where resilience is forged. Historians still argue whether the medieval dungeon's primary purpose was physical punishment or psychological destruction. What is clear is that it was a place designed to strip away every shred of dignity and hope. Yet here you are, still breathing, still resisting. In the quiet depths of your soul, a faint ember glows. It is fragile, easily snuffed out, but persistent. Because even in the darkest dungeons, light can be found. And as you face whatever comes next, you carry that light within you. The dungeon's shadows begin to soften, fading gently into a distant memory as your mind drifts away from the harsh realities of stone and iron. Imagine the cold walls dissolving into a soft, glowing light that warms your skin without burning. The heavy chains fall away, replaced by gentle breezes that brush against your face like whispered promises of freedom. Feel your breath deepen, slow, and steady as the weight of the dungeon lifts from your chest. The cold dampness is replaced by the warmth of a comforting hearth, the murmur of quiet voices, and the soft rustle of leaves in a peaceful forest. Let your muscles relax, releasing every ache, every pain, as if sinking into a bed of moss beneath ancient trees. Your heart slows, each beat a calm drum guiding you toward rest and renewal. You are safe. You are free. The darkness has no hold over you now. Carry this peace with you as you drift, floating gently on the currents of sleep, where dreams carry you far beyond stone walls and iron chains. And remember, no matter how dark the night, dawn always follows. Good night and sweet dreams.